Good morning, everybody. Welcome to today's second webinar. I was going to say first webinar then, but there was a webinar last week on Capture One Pro 10. And today, though, is the first where we can start digging into the new features. So today we're looking at the new sharpening tools that we've got and also how to proof those as well. If this is your first webinar and you don't know who you are listening to, my name's David. I'm part of the software sales team based out of Copenhagen in Denmark. So bringing this to you from there today. As usual, we've got 60 minutes to go with today. We might actually not need all of that. Let's see how we go. You're very welcome and encouraged to ask questions throughout. If you're unfamiliar with GoToWebinar, if you look at the bottom of your GoToWebinar control panel, if you're on your Mac or PC, the very last panel is called a question. So put a question in there that comes straight through to me. If you are on your Android device or iOS device, you'll see a question mark icon at the bottom. Tap that and again you can ask a question and that will come straight through to me. With regards to questions, if you try to keep it on today's subject, that would be great. Not only helps me, but also helps everyone else who's listening as well. But I might try and just answer some general Capture 110 stuff before we get started. So let us begin. So just give me a second while I change a few displays and other stuff around and then we can get started. So you should see Capture One popping up on screen right now. You might see the cursor highlighted like this from time to time just to help you locate it. Just get my questions up. And also we're just going to throw in hopefully a webcam as well if it's going to play nice for me, and it should. So sorry, I've got two monitors, a whole bunch of windows, just takes a while to shift from presentation mode to showing you Capture One mode. So let's share the webcam as well, so you should be able to see me up here. If you find my face distracting, you can actually just turn it off on your display. You can also change the size of webcam to the size of the Capture One screen. So you can either turn me off or you can change the size. But sometimes it helps to wave my hands around and describe a few things. Okay, so my monitor's over here, so I tend to be looking at the left, so don't worry about that. Couple of general Capture One 10 things. If you're running Capture One 9, it is a paid upgrade to 10. If you have a subscription, then all you need to do is download 10 and get started. So you don't need to take out another subscription. You'd be amazed at the number of people who want to take out a second subscription for 10, even when they've got a subscription for 9. It's the same. So if you're running a subscription, just download 10 and go for it. The easiest way to upgrade, if you go to our website, let's just bring a web page up on screen for a second. Easiest thing to do, go to My Pages, log in, and then it will basically give you a summary of all your licenses and then tell you how to upgrade. So that's that. Okay, so today's subject is looking at one of the new features, which is digging into the three-stage sharpening, as we've now called it, and proof view. So three-stage sharpening and proof view, very important. So what does this actually mean? Well, I've got a couple of shots here from my colleague Drew, who might actually also be lurking in the background. You can see from the metadata that this one here is shot at f5.6, 110mm lens, and this one is shot at f14. Now, traditionally, the tighter you go with your aperture, you can start to creep in something called diffraction. So the smaller the aperture you get, then basically it can start to make the image look softer. That's a totally normal phenomenon. It happens on all cameras. So to correct for that, of course, you can go through the usual process of trying to add in sharpening and so on. But to kind of take that stress away from you, what we've actually done in the lens tool is add something called diffraction correction, which is a correction based on the aperture you've shot at and sort of various other metadata, lens data from the camera itself. And that uses a special kind of sharpening called deconvolution sharpening, which helps to correct for that softness from the smaller aperture. So just to give you a little example, let's zoom both of these to 100% and let's just go somewhere where there's some jagged detail as such. So on the left, we've got our shot at f5.6, super crispy, nice and sharp. And then on the right, we're shot at f14. And you see it's not quite at the level of sharpness and detail of the f5.6 shot. Now you're watching on webinar transmission, so just bear in mind, depending on the quality of your transmission, then you might not see a massive sea change difference. So something this is you should try at home. Bob, who can't see anything, if you can't see the screen, best to log out and log back in again, and you should be all right. So do that. So as I said, if you can't see a massive sea change difference on the webinar transmission, try this at home with some tighter aperture stuff. So in our lens correction tool, all you need to do is check the box diffraction correction, and then it sharpens that up nicely, pretty much to the same level that we've got with our f5.6 shot. Caveat with diffraction correction, it does take longer to process out the image because of the calculations involved. So turning on diffraction correction will mean it takes longer to process the image. I can't say, that it's going to be 2 times longer, 1.5 times longer, depends on a whole bunch of other stuff. Okay, again, if you can't see me, if you can only see me or you can't see the screen, just log out and log back in again, or hide my face and bring that up, okay? Yaroan says, is the diffraction correction the same as lens sharpening in Capture 1.9? No, it's a totally new algorithm to correct for diffraction based problems with smaller apertures in lenses. So it's totally unrelated to Capture 1.9, totally new for Capture 1.10. Okay, so try diffraction correction on your own stuff. As I said, as we're looking in a webinar, you might not, for example, be able to see the difference on screen. So let's move on to a different shot. Let's just grab my nice chilly shot over here. Let's just zoom out a second. And we go back here. Incidentally, you'll see that we've, in the default Capture 1.10 workspace, we've rearranged a few things. If I just go to Window, Workspace, Default, like so, and then that will flick to the new Capture 1.10 workspace, and we've rearranged things a little bit. So we've got the browser on the right-hand side, viewer in the middle still, of course. We've rearranged a few things up on the toolbar, and we've rearranged the order which some of the tool tabs are. We've put lens tool tab earlier because diffraction correction is something that you might want to kind of do at the start of the process just to clear up any diffraction problems. If you're shooting wide open, kind of really isn't no point doing it. But if you're shooting at tighter apertures, turning on diffraction correction is a good idea. John was asking, does it work on TIFFs, JPEGs? No, I think RAW file is the way forward. So go for that. Is it available for all lenses? Yes, it certainly is. So it's not a phase 1 thing. It's not a Sony thing. It's for all available lenses. And yes, Ron, it does take into account the actual lens aperture and so on and so forth. Okay. So a few of you are asking that. Yes, we do take notice of the lens metadata. So that's why you see the lens tab moved up here. We've rearranged a few other things in the Capture On workspace just to help discovery and so on and so forth. As always, if you want to play around with your workspace, if you look under view, there's all kind of options for playing around with your workspace. And don't forget, you can save your workspace, so you can always recall different workspaces at any point in time. So going back to sharpening again. So in this case, we've turned on our diffraction correction. Even on this shot, this is a f11, for example. Let's just make sure that I'm looking at the right one because I was playing around with this yesterday. Yes. I'm just going to check we're on default sharpening. Yes, we are. So even on this shot, this is at f11. So if we turn diffraction correction off, it makes ever such a tiny difference. So, but at f11, might as well turn it on. Gives you that extra bit of sharpness. So next, we can move on to new sharpening tools, which is also very exciting. So if you're used to working with the sharpening tools in Capture One, it's generally much the same, except we've added a new slider here called halo suppression, which is really good if you want to do some additional extra sharpening, basically. So let's say we're being a little bit aggressive with the sharpening. So I'm looking at 100%. This is an 80 megapixel file from a phase one camera, not a camera, a phase one camera. So let's just bump up the sharpening a little bit more, and we'll be a little bit more aggressive with radius. And of course, what starts to happen when you're more aggressive with sharpening is that we can get halos on the unsharp masking. So let's just zoom into 100% or 200 just to illustrate that a little bit better. So what you can start to see creep in is those halos on your high contrast edges. So if you need to sharpen aggressively, let's just go back to 100%. If you need to sharpen aggressively, then you can dial in some halo suppression to help remove those halos, but still get that nice crisp sharp image as well. So if we drag up halo suppression, we can heap it on quite high, then that helps to take away those halos. So to get a good comparison, let's clone some images. So I'm just going to fit this back into screen again. Let's bring up my browser. So let's clone this image. I've actually got a few here already. I'm just going to delete these so I don't get confused. So we've got our image here. Let's clone it. So then we can do some comparison. So on our first image here, we've got our diffraction correction ticked on. If we go to sharpening, we've got more aggressive sharpening. So let's go to this one and then zoom into 100%. Like so, and then let's crank up halo suppression to help get rid of those halos, and then plop these two guys side by side. Let's hide our browser like so. So the one on our left, that was with our more aggressive sharpening and no halo suppression, and the one on our right is the same sharpening but now also with halo suppression. So we've got a nice crisp super sharp image. I'm kind of probably going a bit more than I normally would, but just to show you the positive benefit of the halo suppression. So by dragging that up, that helps to get rid of those halos, which kind of make the image look unpleasant and crunchy and so on. And now we can get that nice sharp image that we see on the right hand side without those nasty halos that we've got before. So what halo suppression allows you to do is just have more aggressive sharpening, but get rid of those nasty halos that kind of make it unpleasant to look at. Quick break to answer some of your questions. Is there a list of supported lenses? Yes, if you download Capture One 10, download the release notes. There's a huge table of all the various different lenses we support, or you can just basically browse through all the various manufacturers that we have there as well. So yes. A couple of you again asking about where's diffraction supported. Supported for everything based on the metadata of the lens. So there's no discrimination in that respect. Does it work as good when there's no lens metadata? Obviously, if there's no lens metadata, like if you're using a technical camera, then it's not going to work as well because we don't have the full lens aperture data. If you're working with like one of our Alpha systems on the IQ back, you can actually punch in the aperture on the IQ back itself, which will load that into the metadata, and then that's going to help your diffraction correction. So if you do have an IQ system, then don't forget you can actually plug that in as part of the metadata. Yes, we're always adding new lenses. A couple of you are asking. Every time we release Capture One, we add more lenses. What's the difference between sharpening and clarity? Well, sharpening is sharpening. Clarity is mid-tone contrast adjustment. So two totally different things. So clarity raises up your mid-tone contrast. It's kind of a nice way of adding contrast without killing the blacks and whites, but it's nothing to do with sharpening. Halo suppression a blurring effect? No, it actually goes much more deeper and much more complicated than that. We should get a R&D nerd on. What does the threshold slider do? So threshold slider, best example I can give, threshold prevents sharpening on areas which are the same color. So if you imagine a totally blue sky, then the pixel values are very close to each other. So there's no point sharpening those same colored pixels because you're just going to make it noisy. So the greater the threshold, the more we leave alone those kind of areas of the same color. So generally the default threshold setting is okay. But if you feel it's, being a bit too aggressive on the edges, then you can raise that up a little more. But generally, you're probably okay on the default. Will this benefit me with an RX10? Yes, it's going to benefit any camera. I shall say it again. It will benefit any camera that you're shooting with tight aperture. Can I punch in metadata also on IQ250 backs? I'm not sure actually. I'll let Drew catch up and answer some of those questions. So, can we mouse over the halo areas? Yeah, let's just go in a bit closer. So let's go to 200%. So left-hand side, we've got no halo suppression. Right-hand side, we got lots of halo suppression. So look along this chilly edge here, for example. You see we've got that white-black as a product of our hard sharpening, and then on the right hand side we don't have that halo in particular because we've suppressed that with the new slider. And a good question from Ingolf, what's the difference between sharpening and structure? Well, again, structure is kind of similar to sharpening, but it's more targeted for edge enhancement. So anything with lots of little tricky fine details, and this is probably a good case. Let's just go to 100%. And then if we throw in some clarity, as David was asking, so that gives us a mid-tone contrast boost, doesn't change our sharpening. If we add structure, then that helps for edge definition. So it's really good for like architectural details, landscapes, probably this to some extent. Not for people, because it can make them look pretty unpleasant, but it's good for dialing in some fine detail. Okay, good all-round settings to start off with sharpening. Actually, the default is pretty good. Let's just bring the browser back like so, and then let's just grab, whoops, sorry, not that, this image back here again. Let's just clone this variant once more. So we've got another virtual copy, and I'm going to reset to default. So resetting here with the little backwards arrow there, like so. This resets to the default settings that we suggest in Capture One. It's camera dependent, so the values that you see here might be different for your camera. It might be different depending on the ISO you're shooting at, and so on. So you're not necessarily going to see the same values here all the time. That's a good default starting point. If you feel that's too much or not enough, then you can always adjust it to taste, and then you can set that as defaults for the phase one in this case, but it could be your Sony, Nikon, Canon, Pentax, Fuji, etc., and so on. But these are pretty good default starting points. There's a good balance between good sharpening but not going too far. So that's why you might see those figures like that. Okay, let's go back to our sharpened image like so. I think I'll probably take the structure off. It kind of doesn't need it in this case, really. So let's just go with Nice sharpening. Again, I'm probably going a little bit harder than I normally would, just so that you can see that it's nice and crisp on the webinar transmission. So now we've got our image sharpened. We're looking at 100%. It looks nice on screen. If we output this to a full size TIFF, then we're going to get a nice, lovely, sharp image. But of course, we're not always exporting to a full size TIFF. We might be downsizing for some web use. We might be downsizing just to go to a designer for layout and so on. So when we downsize an image, or indeed upsize an image, there's some potential effect on the sharpening of the image. Now, previously in Capture One 9, you had really no idea how that was going to affect your final output. So if I say downsize this to 2000 pixels across, how's it going to look? Capture One 9, you had no idea. You had to export it, take a look, and then suck it and see, basically. But now what we've added in Capture One 10 is something called a proof view, which basically proofs the image on screen to exactly how the output is going to look, so you can manipulate settings to get exactly what you want in the output without any guesswork involved. So it's called process recipe proofing, to be very specific, because it's proofing the currently selected process recipe. So you'll see it under View, Show Recipe Proofing, like so. There's also an icon which are these little spectacles. By default, they're over here on the right hand side, but for some reason I prefer it over here. But look for the spectacles icon. So how does this work? So let's, I'm just going to delete these recipes and we'll make them from new. So right now, if we say pick TIFF 8-bit, we've got no scaling and so on. So if I turn on my proof view, then my view isn't really going to change so much because the scaling isn't going to change so much because we're not changing this. But let's say we want to downsize, we want to go to web or something like that. So I'm going to make a new process recipe. Let's call this 3000 pixels wide, JPEG sRGB, like so. So now we can build our process recipe. So I'm going to have sRGB, I'm going to have a JPEG, we're going to scale it to a width of X number of pixels. So let's say 3000 pixels, like so. So that basically gives me the first building blocks of my recipe. So now if I turn on proof view, remember I'm looking at 100%. It's important that when you're proofing, you're looking at 100%, so you see pixels per pixels. Let's turn proofing on, and you see now it snaps instantly to my 3000 pixels across. So now I know exactly what it's going to look like when I come to finally output. So we're looking at a number of things here. First of all, we're looking at the JPEG compression, and let's just bring up my process summary. So right now I've got 100% on my JPEG compression. So if I rack that down to 0, then instantly on screen it's going to show me what 0, like the lowest quality of JPEG, is going to look at this distance. So what this does mean that I can manipulate this slider and get a good balance between the file not being too large and having nice quality at that particular size. Because generally what I've been doing is that I just kind of leave it at 80 because I know I'm going to get a nice JPEG. But really at this size, did I need it to be that high? Probably not. I could probably get away if I pixel peep at my screen. It's going to be harder for you guys to see. Then I know I can get away with around 50. It still looks nice. But the benefit is I get a smaller file size, which is shown down here. So you see, as I change the slider, we get a better representation of what the file size is going to be. So now I can optimize my JPEG compression much better than I could in Capture One 9, for example, because I would just leave it on 80, figured hope for the best, I'm going to get nice quality. File might be a bit big, which is a disadvantage because you want your web pages to load faster. You don't want to be sending such big files over the internet and so on. We're also proofing the ICC profile. So if we just flick to, we probably won't see a huge amount of difference between these two guys, but it is proofing the ICC profile as well. Incidentally, for our JPEG export in version 10, the compression algorithm has been, go away doc, the compression algorithm has been updated to be more efficient, so you're going to get a smaller JPEG file size for the same quality, again, compared to Capture One 9. So first of all, we're proofing all this stuff here. Now, if we move to the Adjustments tab, we've got some nice new options we can do here as well. So we've got Ignore Crop, as before, which is great if you're sending out to a retoucher and you just want to give them everything, but you've been cropping on set to get an idea of how it's going to look, a final image. We can check Ignore Crop, and that will produce the full file. Very good for retouching. So sharpening, we've got four choices here. We've got no output sharpening. So that will stick with the existing sharpening that we've got here, but we're not going to have any other additional sharpening. So when we downsize an image or upsize an image, that potentially has a negative effect on the sharpening levels that we've used. So the sharpening levels that you saw me set earlier, if we downsize or upsize, there could be a negative effect. It could potentially soften the image just a little tiny bit. So it might be useful to say, well, let's add some output sharpening for screen. This image is going to be used on the web, 3000 pixels wide, for example. So let's dial in a bit of output sharpening for screen. So again, we've got amount, radius, and threshold. So as I drag the slider up, I'm just going to go super aggressive, and then basically let's just go super aggressive here. I'm doing that. This is not how I would sharpen it, just so you can see that it's instantly proofing the sharpening value. So now we can dial in exactly the kind of additional sharpening over and above what we've already done to correct for that downsizing of the image from its 80 megapixel glory down to 3000, a measly 3000 pixels across. So that's proofing that instantly as well. So now we can put just that little extra touch of sharpening in to correct for that. If we're going to print, we can also sharpen for print like so, and we have a slightly different dialog here as well. We have an amount slider, but then we have a distance, and this is the viewing distance that you're looking at the print, either as a percentage of diagonal, inches, or centimeters. So let's say we were going to produce this and it was going to be in a magazine, average viewing distance, don't know, depends how long your arms are, let's say 70 centimeters, and then we want to just dial that sharpening down again till we get something acceptable to us. Again, depending on what you're printing to, your paper type and so on, you might need some level of experimentation in here to get to your personal preference. We're all different. Some of you might like it sharper, some of you might like it softer, but it gives you a good ballpark figure of what's going on for sharpening. Another super handy option here is disable everything, and this will definitely make the image look softer. So this turns off everything, turns off diffraction correction, turns off the sharpening that we did earlier in the sharpening tool here. And has no additional sharpening. So if you're producing like a full-size TIFF 16-bit RGB and you're going to retouch, then sometimes you might want to just kill all sharpening because the retoucher has said that's how I want to work. So on set, when you're shooting, you can dial in the sharpening so that it looks nice and punchy and crisp, and you know that your capture is correct. But when you come to export, you could disable all. So let's just do let's go back to output sharpening for screen like so. That gives me something nice and crispy, which is good. And then let's go to, let's just actually process this out. Let's just choose a folder where to put this, exports, because what we can do is have a quick look. So this one here, we've got output sharpening for screen, JPEG, 3000 pixels across. Let's process that out. Well, let's check there's nothing going on in my queue. Whoops, let's get rid of that old stuff. Clear the queue, process, and start my queue again. So that's going to start my processing off. like so. Remember, diffraction correction on takes a little bit longer to process. So there's my output, like so. 3000 pixels across, nice and sharp. Let's do another one. Let's disable everything, like so, and then process this guy out. See, that happened a bit quicker because we didn't have our diffraction correction on. Let's just open these both up, like so, and let's just zoom in a little bit. Zoom in a little bit. 1, 2, we at the same zoom level? Yeah. I should open these in Photoshop, really. Hang on, let's do that. Rather than preview, let's do it properly. Open with Photoshop. Oh, thank you, Adobe. Yes. It's because I'm not signed into Creative Cloud, so I get shouted at. Okay, let's bring this up full screen. Oh, it wants me to open them again. Okay, let's do that. So one shot, two shots. So let's zoom in to 100%. Let's go on this one. Let's zoom in to 100%. So if we flick to this one, so that's the one that was sharpened with the sharpening tool, and then we had our output sharpening for screen. And then this one, go to that. See, no sharpening at all, quite a noticeable difference if I flick between the two. If you can't see this on your webinar transmission, don't worry. I am recording it at super high quality, so you'll be able to see this much clearer. But you can see there's a definite or a massive advantage with doing that extra sharpening if we're going to export. We're in Instagram nation now, of course, so we're often exporting out to Instagram. So you could set yourself up an Instagram recipe, for example, which has the ideal sharpening settings for that. We could set up recipes for obviously publishing to other social media, to your website, if you're creating proofs for your clients and so on. So certainly makes a super nice difference if we go through those 3 stages and sharpen the image appropriately. So let's go back into Capture One 10. Drew's been doing a fantastic job in the background answering questions for me. I'll just pick out a few which some of the common questions. Could I put a printer paper ICC profiled soft proof? Yes. Drew answered you that, but if anyone else is interested, if we say show all in ICC profiles, we can pick out any of our various different paper profiles that we've got, and it will soft proof to that on screen. So let's just pick a white wall, something that I know is pretty flat, probably this one. There you go. So proofs straight away like so. So that is possible. You'll just need to say show all as opposed to show recommended. Show recommended, the list is pretty tiny, like so. Yes, you can do that. No halo removal at output sharpening, Jerome has asked. No, but we've already removed that as such. So we've done pretty much, let's just go back to output sharpening for screen. The chances are for screen, you're not going to be like super aggressive because we've already got sharpening on the image, but we've got that negative effect of downsizing, so we just want to add that back. But you're not going to go crazy with aggressive sharpening here, so there's really no point having the halo sharpening on there. Sharpening in the printer dialog is different, actually. Potentially, we could add the same stuff in the print dialog, but if you go into our print dialog, so if we say File, Print as such, then we've got some additional sharpening here, which is just a little bit more basic as such. But the idea of having the setting here is that if you're exporting and then like sending to an external printer to have that done. Which method is used for scaling? Good question. Actually, I've got no idea. Bicubic, Lancos, or something different. I don't know actually. I couldn't tell you, but what I can tell you is if you compare it to the various other apps on the market that do resizing, Capture One stands out very well, and it was something we actually improved back in Capture One 9 as well. So rescaling in 9.3 is far better than what you're going to have in version 8 or earlier versions of Capture One 9 as well. Just checking out any other questions. Disable, what does disable actually disable? Disables everything. So if we say disable all, the clue is in the name. That gets rid of, turns off diffraction correction. It's not visible here because it's a process recipe. Remember, you can run multiple recipes at the same time. So the reason why it doesn't physically deactivate it here is because you might have a process recipe for screen, which doesn't disable it, and then you might have your 16-bit tiff, which does disable everything, like so. So notice actually when I switch recipes that the proofing view changes as well. So it does disable everything. Really useful, as I said, if you're going to retouch. Is 150% the max resize still? No, I think it's 250. I think it's 250. Let's check. So let's try 300. Nope. 250. There we go. So we can do 250 to resize like so. And of course, you're going to get your proof view at 250%. So now, if we wanted to output sharpen for screen, then we could dial in a little bit more to cope with that additional resizing as well. And there's no guesswork involved. You know exactly what you're going to get as well. So it's super handy. Yes, disable all does disable all. Lens sharpness, fall off, everything, every kind of sharpening that is applied to the image. Final thing to mention about sharpening, which I nearly forgot, is if you're working on local adjustments, let's turn off proof view for a second. If you're working on local adjustments, let's say we want to do some local sharpening, which is very useful for fashion, portrait, and so on. Then we made a slight improvement to that as well. So let's make a new layer and just call that local sharp. Might as well stick with this image. Let's take a brush, draw mask, right click to get our adjustments up. And then let's just do a quick mask around this guy, for example. So we've got our mask. Oh, let's just fill in the middle. So we've got our mask here like so, and we want to do some additional sharpening. So on the background, let's bring our sharpening tool up so we can see it better. On our background, we've got this sharpening, but let's say for whatever reason, we want to do some additional sharpening. Let's just bring this in. Probably in this case, it doesn't really need any additional sharpening, but just bear with me for the purpose of a demo. Now on Capture One 9, whatever you set here for the radius and threshold had to be the same on the additional sharpening layers. But now in Capture One 10, you can mix and match all your radius and so on and so forth. So it's just simply less restrictive. So on the background, if we had, let's say on the background we had a relatively low radius, because a lot of this stuff on this particular shot, we've got shallow depth of field, so there's not so much detail as soon as we drop away from our chilly friends at the top here. So we could argue that we want quite a nice sort of low radius so that we're not sharpening the out of focus areas. And then on our focus point here, we could then argue, well, let's have additional sharpening on this point, and we could have a more aggressive radius and so on. So it means you've got really amazing sharpening control over the whole image. Again, if you think of a beauty shot, I'm not a beauty, but you get the idea. You could have very low sharpening on the background layer, and then with a nice kind of low radius and a low amount, so we're not sharpening skin detail and so on. And then on our additional local sharpening layers, we could, to like the features like eyes and lips and hair and so on, we could simply pile in more sharpening to that and really get the best compromise of what needs to be sharpened and what doesn't. So local sharpening, it may sound like a small feature, but if you think about how you would do that in Capture One 9, on the background I'd say, well, I want a nice low radius because I don't want to sharpen too much my out of focus areas. I want my visual focus subject to leap out at me on the screen. So on the background, I'm going to have a nice low radius, but then on Capture One 9, when I come to local sharpening, I'd still have that low radius and I wouldn't be able to control the threshold. So now with the ability to have nice low radius on generally on the image, and then where it matters, we can heap up the sharpening a little bit more as well. So now I can get a really sort of lovely super sharp image, but I'm not over sharpening the background where there's no detail to sharpen. So if you're putting sharpening onto soft areas of the image, all you're going to do really is bring out additional noise. So what it does mean is that again you're taking the guesswork out of your final output. Sharpening on the raw file gives you some more possibilities for creativity, and also gives you the best quality as well, because you're sharpening on raw data, which is way better than sharpening on like a JPEG or a TIFF file or whatever. So try to do sharpening if you can in Capture One. Obviously, I appreciate if you're going to high-end retouch, then you want to disable all sharpening anyway. Okay, just back to your questions. We're doing pretty good for time. Is there default recipes for JPEG, TIFF, and so on? Yeah, if we go to the process recipe tool, all the top ones here are defaults that come preloaded into Capture One. If you want to make a new one, you just say plus. If you want to run additional process recipes, you just tick the box. Remember, proofing is the one that it's selected. So if we turn proofing on, I'm proofing to 250%. If we go to my JPEG, I'm now proofing to 3000 pixels. Also, notice how quick that is. I'm not running a supercomputer. I'm on a 2-year-old MacBook Pro, but also with Capture 110, performance speed, like panning and browsing and moving around images is like really super slick and smooth now. And it doesn't mean you have to have the latest, greatest Mac Pro and so on and so forth. So any of you on any hardware are going to see a positive benefit in performance moving to Capture One. Because remember, I've got an 80 megapixel shot here, which I'm essentially processing on the fly to certain dimensions with 3 different levels of sharpening on it, with a different color space profile and so on. And if we turn on Proof View, 1, 2, 3, 4, 3.5 seconds to proof all that data directly on screen. And again, this is 80 megapixels. Imagine if this was 40 megapixels, we're going to probably a third of that time as well. Okay. Just looking at your last questions. Love the webinars. David is very good. Oh, thank you, James. Nice, nice to hear. Drew's been a champ in the background asking some of your questions. Mark says, I find my iMac 2007 is slow when drawing a mask. Will it be any better in 10? Yeah, it should be a little better actually. That's just a positive benefit of all the other stuff. Essentially, the RGB pipeline, like all the processes that go on to the raw file, has all been kind of streamlined and changed. We've optimized a whole lot of stuff. So that has a positive benefit over all kinds of various different things. So whatever you're using, you're probably going to see a benefit. 2007 iMac, you're kind of on the edge of probably hardware that is capable of running Capture One, I would think. So you might not see that. David says, just the sharpening is not as slick in print module. Could we export a TIFF and print from Affinity? Yeah, sure. Or Photoshop or Affinity or Pixelmator or whatever. Yeah, if you really want to exercise the sharpening capabilities, then yeah, go for it in a process recipe like so. Export out your TIFF and then print in your application of choice. But you never know, that could be something we could expand out into the print module as well. Does Capture One benefit from good GPUs? Yes, absolutely. If you go into the preferences, you can see we've got under, general hardware acceleration, OpenCL. So if you have a beefy graphics card, then it does make all the difference for sure. And the difference is for basically, let's have some smaller thumbnails. When we're browsing to an image, and then we want to view at 100%. So as I said, I'm on a 2-year-old MacBook Pro. This is a 80 megapixel file. But what's also happening is that when I'm looking at this image, Capture One's pre-caching the next image. So if we move on to the next one, like so, then it's almost instantaneous. And then if I flick back between those two images, you see the colors slightly different, that we're loading to 100% straight away. And I advanced to the next one, and there was no time to render to 100. Next one, no time to render. Next one, no time to render. Next one, no time to render. Previous, 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 previous. Straight away rendering to 100%. So it's really going to help your systems as well. Okay. That pretty much answers everything that I think we need to talk about for sharpening. Desmond says, each time I turn my head, the sound quality suffers. That's strange. Should be all right on this microphone. Hang on. Let me bend it a bit closer because I'm using this headset, nothing else. Let's see. On MacBook Pro 2011, OpenGL is slower than the CPU. Yeah, that's a good point. If you're having kind of slowdowns, we do run some processes in the background when you start Capture One to test your GPU to see if it passes our benchmark test. But if you've got any kind of weird display stuff going on, you can always turn it off manually here, like so. Because some older cards might not work so well, but you can turn it off manually if you wish. Okay, I'm gonna probably leave it there, I would think. And I'm gonna just mention what's happening next week. So bear with me while I need to bring an image up on screen for you guys. Hang on, too many windows. Let's bring this up. Okay, so picture coming up on your screen now. So next week, I'm going to talk about this device, which I'm super excited about, which is a hardware input device for Capture One. I got one delivered yesterday, which I'm very excited about. So any of the tech geeks in us will love this. I've just managed to unbox one for a second. Oops. Okay, back on Capture One. I've just managed to unbox one. I don't think my USB cable is long enough. Hang on. Let's see. Hang on a second. So here's just a little idea. So this is the dial panel that you can see. Notice it's written at the top there, exposure, structure, and so on. All these are really like super nice, high quality dials. If I just bring up the exposure tool, so you see if I just tweak the exposure dial, you see I get instant feedback on the screen like so, and I can tap to reset, and then we can flick through different banks by pressing a button down here. So basically these 12 dials actually have 36 different slider adjustments on. So I know it looks a little bit overkill and so on, but if you have a lot of images to work with and you need to get them out the door quickly, that whole tangent set is an absolute revelation for moving through Capture One quickly. I can't stress that enough. So even if you don't think it's for you, please join next week and have a look to see exactly how that works. They do have an iOS app as well that works really nicely on iPads. So sort of Doug just mentioned that as well. So if you don't want to buy tangent hardware gear, I mean, it is very high-end stuff. It's beautifully made, very solid. It's gonna last for years. I should point out that the pitch you saw with those 4 panels, they can be used as a complete set or individually. So you don't have to go out and spend a bunch of cash on all that stuff. If you just want to use the dial panel that you saw me briefly showing you, like so, then you can just use that, for example. But I'll give you the full rundown next week. And I'll also try to show the iOS app as well, which they have a free kind of trial one you can check out, and you can use that as well. But it's brilliant. But again, you have to kind of use it to kind of get your head around it and see the benefits of it as well. So that's next week. Just going back to someone was asking at the beginning of the webinar about resources and books and that sort of stuff. We've got a new, if you go to products, software, Capture One Pro, you can see my screen, yes, and have a look at the plus menu and look at Learning Hub. Then there's a getting started video right at the top. We've got these new things called simple adjustment guides, which is myself or guest photographers or other phase one guys just showing you a process in an image of how it works. And then we've got a whole bunch of new Capture 110 tutorials, which you can pick up here as well. Or you can go to our YouTube channel and find the Capture 110 Pro tutorials playlist, or you can go to the new help site, help.phase1.com. For the books that are already existing, like Sasha Ernie's excellent Capture One 9 book, that's still going to be a great resource. If you're new to Capture One, that's a fantastic book which you're going to get loads of benefit out, even though it's not a Capture One 10, it's Capture One 9 book, for example. What about the new keyboard? If you don't know what Jean-Pierre is talking about, oh, it wasn't Jean-Pierre, it was Ron. This is an early prototype of a Logic keyboard, which has a shortcut map and a set for Capture One. We've changed it slightly from this one, so I've got a special edition, haha, in theory, and that will be available soon. I'm sure we'll send out some news when it's ready, but it'll be a UK layout and a US layout. So. Okay, I think that pretty much takes me to the end of the webinar. Roughly in 1 day's time, 24 hours, you'll get a follow-up email and a link to the recording, which hopefully worked all right in nice, fantastic quality, and also links to sign up for the future webinars. So if you don't know where to go to sign up, just look out for that follow-up email in roughly 24 hours time, and hope to see you next week on the 15th. Thanks to Drew in the background for doing a great job of answering questions. There was a lot of you today, so that really took some weight off my shoulders. So cheers, Drew, and see you all again soon. Thanks, guys.